So we urge the government to follow our plan, which is to scrap VAT on energy, to axe the carbon tax, which, by the way, will have an enormous impact also on agriculture, because farmers will have to start paying what's called the fertiliser tax as part of that regime, and Labour are doing nothing about that. And finally, getting rid of these levies that are making our energy amongst the most expensive in the world. You know, we have to be realistic about what our country needs in order to grow.
The Conservatives have now repudiated their net zero goals. They say they would drop strict net zero timelines in favour of gas, nuclear and renewables. So what do they make of today's energy price cap change? Victoria Atkins is the Shadow Environment Secretary. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Calum.
So, reaction, first of all, I think, from you to the news that the energy price cap is going to rise by 4% compared with the current level. This will kick in October, and so a household using a typical amount of gas and electricity will pay £60 a year more. Was there anything the government could have done to offset a rise of this type, of this nature?
Well, they could have followed the Conservatives' cheap power plan. I mean, this is another cost on households as we head into winter, when people are really feeling the pinch. And whilst the new Prime Minister has tried to make some announcements over the summer about buses and so on, the fact is that energy and food prices are going to be the two huge costs that households and indeed businesses are facing this winter. And I know that many people will be looking at this latest news, understanding, of course, that under Labour their bills will have risen by £400 as opposed to being cut by £300, which is what they promised us all at the general election. But people will be looking at this latest price rise, and many people will be thinking, I just don't know how I'm going to manage this.
So tell us what should be done. What should an intervention from the government look like now, today?
Well, Claire Coutinho, our Shadow Energy Secretary, set out and indeed has been speaking for for the last couple of years about the need for the government to put ideology to one side and look at the realities of the energy market, because this isn't theoretical. It's not just about think tank papers and numbers on the news. This is about what is actually happening when the envelope lands metaphorically in people's doormats, but also, of course, the impact it's having on businesses. So we urge the government to follow our plan, which is to scrap VAT on energy, to axe the carbon tax, which, by the way, will have an enormous impact also on agriculture, because farmers will have to start paying what's called the fertiliser tax as part of that regime, and Labour are doing nothing about that. And finally, getting rid of these levies that are making our energy amongst the most expensive in the world. You know, we have to be realistic about what our country needs in order to grow. Of course, this must be married with very, very bold and exciting plans on nature conservation and our environment. And I will be coming up with those in the coming weeks, I promise you. But we have to, we really do have to get a grip on this. The government has to understand the damage that their ideology is having on people's pockets and their abilities to keep their heads above water.
There's a risk, isn't there, that it's easy to attack the ideology for this government is in your view holding on to, which is not a million miles away from an ideology that the Conservative Party itself held a while ago. So we heard from Miatta Fanbula, for example, the Energy Secretary on this programme earlier, who was talking up the need for more renewables to reduce the impact of gas pricing on our energy bills. And actually, it strikes me that sort of pursuit of renewables is something that was sort of a shared, almost verging on consensus, wasn't it, until not that long ago?
Look, we have all tried to make the Climate Change Act of 2008 work. We have all tried, and the intention behind that piece of legislation was to stop climate change. Climate change is happening. And so this legislation is not working. And what is more, it's putting enormous pressures on people's cost of living and their ability to run their households and run their businesses. And so we as Conservatives, under Kemi's new leadership, we're daring to ask the question, well, look, if this doesn't work, what can we do to try to cut the terrible impacts of climate change that we are seeing this summer, let alone the years that have gone past, but also to do so in a way that doesn't hobble our neighbours, our friends, ourselves with our own energy bills, let alone hobbling our businesses that cannot continue to pay these prices. I mean, I was speaking to a business owner in my constituency on Monday, a very successful business owner, and he told me, privately, that he is genuinely concerned about how his little business will be able to continue because he simply cannot afford the energy prices and the hikes, but also critically the taxes that this government has put on employing people and put on his business. And I'm afraid at some point these left-wing ideologies will come home to roost, and I'm sorry to say they're coming home to roost now in a very real way for people across the country.
Can you appreciate that the energy price cap is rising, partly at least because of factors out with the control of this government, and that is something that the previous Conservative government had to contend with as well? And lest we forget, at that point the Treasury introduced the energy bill support scheme, this £400 energy bill discount, which was then later withdrawn. Do you appreciate that there are circumstances here out with the control of the Labour government?
Callum, I remember doing media rounds a few years ago when Labour opposition spokesmen were calling us out on fuel prices, energy prices, at that point in time. And we were very much making the point that the war in Ukraine had a huge impact on energy. We do not, we fully accept that. But what we're saying is control what you can control. And these levies that the Secretary of State absolutely can control. The decision, by the way, that is sitting on her desk as to whether or not to open up Rosebank and Jackdaw, decisions, by the way, which Claire Coutinho, as Secretary of State, took and said yes to. This government has been dilly-dallying over this and holding this up to the point that
there's a process underway, isn't there?
Yeah, but they have been. We know under her predecessor, Ed Miliband, all of the rumours were that he was going to say no, and this has had a huge impact up in Aberdeen. Particularly, I was there myself a couple of months ago, seeing the impact that this shying away of Labour from the North Sea and its ability to help us as part of the energy mix, seeing the impact that's having on jobs up there. It's why we won a by-election in Aberdeen South with more than 50% of the vote, because we understand the economics and we are determined to work with communities, with companies, to help ensure that we keep energy prices down, just as I am determined as Shadow Secretary of State, and I hope in due course Secretary of State for DEFRA, to work with farmers to understand what they need, including axing the fertiliser tax and the family farm tax, so that they can make their business work, profit, to enable themselves to make some profit out of farming, so that we don't continue to see record farm closures as we have under this government.
It's just something else to ask you about as well, Victoria Atkins. Is next week the right time for Kemi Badenoch to reshuffle the team around her?
No, I don't know anything about reshuffles, but what I can promise your listeners is that as Shadow Environment Secretary, I'm working on a huge project of nature conservation and habitat improvement policies, which I'm very much hoping to announce in the coming weeks.
You don't fancy a promotion?
Now, Calum, how dare you? I genuinely view DEFRA as one of the most important departments in government. I asked Kemi because clearly the Treasury is important. I'm not going to pick out the departments. I'll give
you could replace
the Shadow Chancellor that.
Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm loving my role in DEFRA, and I genuinely want to be able to bring to fruition some of the plans that we have. But as I say, unlike any of the three Secretaries of State that I've been up against under Labour, I actually want to do this role. I love it. I think what a joy to be able to represent our countryside and our coast, and to make sure that they are part of our plans for the economy.
Well, we'll speak to you in whatever role you hold in due course, I'm sure. Victoria Atkins, thank you very much for now. That is Victoria Atkins, who's the Shadow Environment Secretary.